The barracks light snapped on at 0430, flooding the room with harsh fluorescent brightness. Specialist Sarah Chun had been awake for 20 minutes already, lying motionless on her bunk, eyes fixed on the ceiling. For hours of sleep after scrubbing bathrooms until her fingers were raw. It should have shown on her face, but somehow she looked as composed as ever. What Petty Officer Marcus Thompson didn't know was that he was about to discover the most dangerous mistake of his military career. Welcome to those who left a trace. If the story of a hidden operative turning the tables on an abusive drill instructor shocks you, make sure to hit that subscribe button and ring the notification bell. We bring you the most incredible stories of justice, secrets, and military revelations that will leave you speechless. Comment below telling us where in the world you're watching from. We love connecting with our global audience. The drill instructor's spittle landed on Sarah Chen's face as he screamed, his veins bulging beneath his tan skin. Standing at just 5 feet 3 inches, she seemed impossibly small against his towering frame. The other recruits watched in silence as Petty Officer Thompson unleashed his daily barrage of humiliation, targeting the small Chinese-American woman who dared to enter his domain at Naval Training Facility, Clearwater. This isn't some college sorority, Chun. Thompson's words cut through the humid Florida air like a knife. You think because your daddy paid your way through life, you can just waltz in here and play Navy? The sun beat down mercilessly on the training grounds of Clearwater, turning the facility into a pressure cooker of stress and physical exertion. It was day 14 of basic training, and recruit Sarah Chun had already become the favorite target of Petty Officer Marcus Thompson. Stand at attention when I'm talking to you, recruit, Thompson barked, circling Sarah like a predator. His imposing 6 feet 2 inches frame cast a shadow over her as she stood rigid, eyes forward, absorbing every verbal blow without flinching. The other 23 recruits in her platoon avoided eye contact, relieved they weren't today's target. Some even smirked, finding comfort in someone else's misery. "Sir, yes, sir," Sarah replied, her voice steady despite the exhaustion evident in her slight frame. 14 days of minimal sleep, constant physical training, and Thompson's special brand of attention had worn grooves under her eyes, but something in her posture remained unbroken. Thompson leaned in, his face inches from hers. "I don't think you're cut out for this, Chun. Look at you. You can barely hold yourself up. What made you think someone like you belongs here?" "To serve my country, sir," her reply came automatically, the standard response drilled into every recruit. Thompson's laugh was harsh and mocking. "Serve your country? You'll be lucky to serve coffee in the mess hall. That's if you make it through my training, which I highly doubt." Behind them, the obstacle course loomed, its mud pits and rope climbs glistening under the morning sun. It was the third time that week Thompson had made Sarah run it solo while her platoon watched. "Today's your lucky day, Chun. You get to show us all how it's done again." His smile didn't reach his eyes. "And if you fail to beat yesterday's time, everyone does 50 push-ups. Because in my Navy, we don't carry dead weight." The platoon groaned collectively, knowing full well Thompson was setting them up for punishment. Sarah had completed the course in 12 minutes yesterday, already an impressive time for her size. But Thompson had arbitrarily decided she needed to shave off 2 minutes today. "Clock starts now, recruit. Move it." Thompson's whistle pierced the air. Sarah sprinted toward the first obstacle, determination etched into every line of her face as she scaled the wooden wall, her small hands finding purchase where others might struggle. Petty Officer Andrea Manning watched from the sidelines, her clipboard clutched tightly against her chest. Something about Chun had caught Manning's attention days ago, a quiet resilience that seemed almost too practiced for a first-time recruit. Thompson continued his commentary as Sarah navigated the obstacles. "Look at those pathetic arms. My 10-year-old daughter has more upper body strength." As Sarah approached the mud crawl, the most physically demanding section of the course, Thompson stepped closer to the edge. "Faster, Chun. You're letting down your whole platoon." She dove into mud, crawling beneath the barbed wire strung just 18 inches above the ground. The thick, Heavy mud pulled at her uniform, adding pounds to her already exhausted frame. Halfway through, her arm slipped and her face plunged into the mire. A collective intake of breath came from the watching recruits. Thompson stood over her, shaking his head. And that, ladies and gentlemen, is why we have standards. Some people just don't have what it takes. Sarah pulled herself up, mud coating her face, obscuring her features. For a moment, something flashed in her eyes. Not defeat, but something harder, colder. She wiped the mud from her eyes with deliberate slowness. 10 seconds left to beat your time, Chun, Thompson called out, consulting his stopwatch with obvious pleasure. And you failed. Not just yourself, but your entire team. As Sarah emerged from the mud pit, the other recruits glared at her, already dropping position for their punishment push-ups. Only Manning noticed how Sarah's hands curled into tight fists before relaxing again, a controlled response that seemed oddly disciplined for someone supposedly on the verge of breaking. 50 push-ups now, and thank Recruit Chun for this special opportunity. Thompson's voice carried across the training yard as 23 bodies dropped to the ground in unison. Sarah moved to join them, but Thompson's hand shot out, grabbing her shoulder. Not you, Chun. You get to stand there and watch what you've caused. The psychological warfare was expertly crafted. Isolate the target, make her responsible for her peers' suffering, build resentment within the unit. Classic military hazing disguised as instruction. Sarah stood at attention, mud still dripping from her uniform as her fellow recruits counted off push-ups, shooting venomous glances between repetitions. 21, 22. They grunted in unison, arms trembling. Recruit Jackson, a broad-shouldered man from Tennessee, muttered between breaths. Thanks a lot, China doll. Sarah's expression remained carefully neutral, though something flickered behind her eyes at the slur. Not hurt, but calculation. It was a look that would have given Thompson pause had he been paying closer attention. That's enough. Petty Officer Manning's voice cut through the tension. She approached with measured steps, clipboard still in hand. Recruits, on your feet. It's time for classroom instruction. Petty Officer Thompson, a word. Manning led Thompson several paces away, their conversation hidden behind professional gestures, but clearly intense. The platoon formed up, deliberately leaving Sarah isolated at the rear of the formation. Forward march, Manning called, and the group moved toward the classroom buildings. Inside the sterile classroom with its navy blue carpet and white walls adorned with recruitment posters and naval heroes, the recruits settled into their chairs. Sarah took a seat in the back corner, still caked in drying mud. Manning cleared her throat. Today's lesson is on naval history and code of conduct. Her eyes lingered on Sarah for a moment too long, specifically on the importance of unit integrity and ethical leadership. The irony wasn't lost on anyone in the room. As Manning began her presentation, Recruit Rodriguez leaned toward Sarah. "Why don't you just quit already?" he whispered. "Nobody wants you here." Sarah turned slightly, her voice barely audible. "I earned my place here." Rodriguez snorted. "Yeah? What did you do? Sleep your way in?" The comment hung in the air between them. Sarah's response was unexpected. Not anger or hurt, but a small, almost imperceptible smile that seemed to contain some private knowledge. "Pay attention, recruits," Manning called out, noticing the exchange. "This material will be on tomorrow's examination." The lesson continued for 45 minutes, covering the Navy's core values of honor, courage, and commitment. Throughout it all, Sarah took meticulous notes despite the mud caking her fingers, her posture perfect despite what must have been exhaustion pulling at every muscle. When class dismissed the mess hall, Sarah rose to leave with the others. "Recruit Chun," Manning called. A moment. The others filed out, a few making snide comments just loud enough to be heard. When the room cleared, Manning approached Sarah's desk. "You're quite a mess." It wasn't said unkindly. "Yes, ma'am," Sarah replied, standing at attention despite her disheveled state. Manning studied her with narrowed eyes. "Thompson's treatment of you has been notable. It's training, ma'am." "Is it?" Manning set her clipboard down. There's a fine line between building resilience and targeted harassment. Sarah remained silent, her expression unreadable. What's your background, Chin? Before enlisting? Manning's question seemed casual, but her eyes were sharp. College graduate, ma'am. Political science from Stanford. Manning nodded slowly. Good school. Expensive. What brings a Stanford grad to enlist rather than officer candidate school? For the first time, something like genuine emotion crossed Sarah's face. A flash of what might have been pride. Family tradition, ma'am. Military family? Yes, ma'am. Who served? Sarah hesitated just for a heartbeat. My father and his father before him. Manning made a non-committal sound. Clean yourself up before mess hall. Recruit. And Chun. She paused at the door. Don't let them see they're getting to you. They're not, ma'am, Sarah replied with such quiet certainty that Manning turned back, reassessing the small, mud-covered woman. No, Manning said after a moment. I don't believe they are. In the women's showers 30 minutes later, Sarah stood under the scalding spray, washing away layers of mud to reveal skin marked by something the other female recruits hadn't noticed before, a small, jagged scar that ran along her right rib cage. It wasn't the kind of scar one got from a childhood accident. Recruit Wilson, brushing her teeth at a nearby sink, spotted it in the mirror. What happened there, Chun? Kitchen accident. Sarah's hand instinctively moved to cover the scar. Something like that. Wilson smirked. Better toughen up if you can't even handle a little cooking. Later in the mess hall, Sarah sat alone at the end of a long table, methodically consuming her meal despite the empty chairs surrounding her. The isolation was deliberate. The platoon had decided she wasn't worthy of their company. Petty Officer Thompson entered, his eyes immediately finding Sarah in the crowd. He made his way over, looming above her. Enjoying your dinner, recruit? His voice carried, ensuring all nearby tables could hear. Yes, sir, Sarah replied, not looking up from her meal. Good, because I've scheduled you for extra physical training this evening. Your performance this morning was an embarrassment to this facility. A smile ghosted across his face as he added, and afterward, you'll be cleaning the head with a toothbrush. Maybe that will help you understand the attention to detail we expect here. From across the room, Manning watched the exchange, her expression thoughtful. When Thompson walked away, she noticed something curious. Sarah's hand had tightened around her fork with such force that her knuckles had turned white, but her face remained completely blank, almost practiced in its neutrality. It was a reaction of someone who had endured far worse than a drill instructor's harassment. That evening, as darkness fell over the base, Sarah knelt on the bathroom floor, scrubbing tiles with a toothbrush while Thompson supervised from the doorway. You know why you're here, don't you, Chin? He asked, arms crossed over his chest. Because I failed to complete the obstacle course in the assigned time, sir, she answered mechanically. Thompson laughed. No, you're here because you don't belong here. The sooner you figure that out and quit, the better for everyone. Sarah looked up then, meeting his gaze directly for the first time. I won't quit, sir. Something in her tone made Thompson straighten slightly. We'll see about that. He checked his watch. You have until 0100 to finish. Not a single spot left, or you start over. He turned to leave, then added, and be ready for tomorrow. If you thought today was tough, you haven't seen anything yet. As his footsteps echoed down the corridor, Sarah's shoulders relaxed minutely. She continued scrubbing, but now there was something different in her movements, efficient, practiced, almost mechanical. She wasn't scrubbing like someone being punished. She was scrubbing like someone who had been trained to be thorough under duress. In her office across the base, Manning sat at her computer, scrolling through personnel files. Sarah Chen's record was open on her screen. Stanford graduate, perfect entrance exam scores, impeccable medical history. Everything seemed in order, almost too perfectly in order. What caught Manning's attention wasn't what was in the file, but what wasn't. There were no personal references, no detailed family history beyond bare-bones information about her parents. Manning frowned, closing the file and leaning back in her chair. Something wasn't adding up about recruit Sarah Chun. The barracks light snapped on at 0430, flooding the room with harsh fluorescent brightness. Sarah had been awake for 20 minutes already, lying motionless on her bunk, eyes fixed on the ceiling. For hours of sleep after scrubbing bathrooms until her fingers were raw. It should have shown on her face, but somehow she looked as composed as ever. On your feet, recruits! The morning petty officer's voice boomed through the women's barracks. PT formation in 5 minutes. The room erupted into organized chaos as women scrambled to dress and prepare for morning physical training. Sarah moved with practiced efficiency, bed made to perfect military precision before most had even put on their shoes. Recruit Wilson bumped into her deliberately on the way to the door. Ready for another day of letting everyone down, Chin? Sarah didn't respond, simply adjusting her course and continuing her preparations. The lack of reaction seemed to irritate Wilson more than any comeback could have. Outside, the pre-dawn air hung heavy with humidity as the platoon formed up for morning PT. Thompson stood at the front, a sadistic smile playing on his lips. Good morning, recruits. I hope you all slept well, because today we're going to push your limits. His eyes locked onto Sarah. Some of you more than others. The routine began with standard exercises, jumping jacks, push-ups, sit-ups, but it quickly became apparent that Thompson had designed this session with a purpose. Every exercise seemed specifically chosen to target upper body strength, Sarah's perceived weakness. 100 push-ups. Thompson called out, pacing between the rows of struggling recruits. Down, up, keep that form perfect. By rep 60, most of the platoon was failing, arms trembling with exertion. By 80, several had collapsed entirely. Sarah, however, maintained her form, her expression fixed in concentration. Thompson stopped beside her, crouching down to speak directly into her ear. Getting tired yet, Chin? Ready to admit this isn't for you? No, sir, she replied between controlled breaths, completing another perfect push-up. Thompson's eyes narrowed. 10 more for you, Chun, since you're doing so well. When the session finally ended 90 minutes later, recruits lay sprawled across the training ground, gasping for breath. Sarah stood with hands on her hips, breathing heavily but still upright. Hit the showers. You got 15 minutes before breakfast, Thompson announced, then pointed at Sarah. Except you, Chin. Commander Reyes wants to see you in her office. A murmur ran through the platoon. Commander Reyes was the executive officer of the training facility. Being summoned to her office was rarely good news. Wonder what you did now, Rodriguez sneered as he passed her. Maybe they finally realized they made a mistake letting you in. Sarah walked across the base to the administration building, her face betraying nothing of her thoughts. The morning sun had fully risen now, casting long shadows across the parade ground. Inside Commander Reyes' office, she found not just a commander, but also Petty Officer Manning waiting for her. Manning's expression was unreadable, but there was tension in the air that hadn't been there before. Recruit Chun, reporting as ordered, ma'am, Sarah announced, standing at attention. Commander Reyes, a stern-faced woman in her late 40s with silver streaking her dark hair, studied Sarah carefully. At ease, recruit. Do you know why you're here? No, ma'am. Reyes exchanged a glance with Manning. It's been brought to my attention that there may be some irregularities in your training experience. Sarah remained silent, waiting. Petty Officer Manning has expressed concern about the nature of Petty Officer Thompson's attention toward you. Would you characterize his treatment as fair and consistent with other recruits? The question hung in the air. It was a test. Complain about a superior officer and be labeled weak, or endure continued harassment. Petty Officer Thompson is preparing us for the challenges of naval service, ma'am, Sarah replied carefully. Commander Reyes leaned forward. That's not what I asked, recruit. For a moment, Sarah seemed to be weighing her response. Permission to speak freely, ma'am? Granted. I believe Petty Officer Thompson has identified me as someone he believes doesn't belong in this program. His methods are designed to make me quit. Her voice remained steady, matter of fact. I will not quit, ma'am. Manning stepped forward slightly. Chun, we reviewed your file. Your physical fitness scores upon entry were exceptional, yet Thompson continues to target your physical capabilities. Do you have any insight as to why? Something flickered across Sarah's face. A moment of calculation. Perhaps he believes my appearance creates false assumptions about my capabilities. Ma'am, I've encountered that before. Have you? Commander Reyes asked, raising an eyebrow. Where? Sarah hesitated, just long enough to be noticeable. In civilian life, ma'am. College athletics. Manning and Reyes exchanged another look. I understand. Your father served, Reyes said, changing direction. What branch? Navy, ma'am. Rank? Lieutenant Commander, ma'am. And your grandfather? Also Navy, ma'am. Chief Petty Officer. Reyes nodded slowly. Family tradition is important to you, then? Yes, ma'am. Very much so. That explains your resilience, Manning commented. Military children often have a different tolerance for stress. Sarah's eyes met Manning's. My father taught me many things, ma'am. The exchange felt laden with unspoken meaning. Commander Reyes stood up. We'll be monitoring your situation more closely, Recruit Chun. If there are further concerns, I expect you to report them immediately. Yes, ma'am. Dismissed. As Sarah turned to leave, Manning called after her. Chun, one more thing. That scar on your side, the one Recruit Wilson commented on in the showers yesterday. How did you get it? The question seemed to catch Sarah off guard. For the briefest moment, her practiced composure slipped. Childhood accident, ma'am. Fell through a glass table when I was 12. Manning's expression made it clear she didn't believe the explanation, but she simply nodded. That will be all, Recruit. Later that day, as the platoon practiced water survival skills in the training pool, Thompson seemed particularly determined to break Sarah's resolve. The exercise required recruits to tread water for 20 minutes while wearing full fatigues. Some of you might find yourselves overboard someday, Thompson explained, pacing along the pool's edge. Your ability to stay afloat could mean the difference between life and death. In the water, recruits were already struggling, the weight of their waterlogged uniforms pulling them down. Sarah's small frame should have been at a disadvantage. Yet she maintained her position with seemingly minimal effort. Thompson noticed. Chun, let's see how you handle a real challenge. He picked up a weighted belt from the equipment rack. Put this on. The belt weighed 10 pounds, not life-threatening, but a significant additional burden for someone her size already wearing soaked clothing. Sir, regulations state that weighted training beyond standard uniform is only. Manning began from her position at the pool's edge. I'm aware of the regulations. Petty Officer Manning. Thompson cut her off. This is a standard exercise for advanced training. I'm simply giving Recruit Chin the opportunity to prove herself. Sarah accepted the belt without complaint, securing it around her waist before returning to the water. What happened next caught everyone off guard. Rather than struggle, Sarah appeared to adjust her technique slightly, her arm movements becoming more efficient, her breathing pattern changing subtly. She wasn't just managing, she was excelling. 15 minutes later, several recruits had been pulled from the pool, unable to continue. Sarah remained, the weighted belt still secure around her waist, her movements controlled and purposeful. Thompson's expression had shifted from satisfaction to puzzlement, then to irritation. Time, he finally called out, ending the exercise. As the remaining recruits climbed out of the pool, gasping and exhausted, Manning handed Sarah a towel. Impressive work, Chun, she said quietly. Thank you, ma'am. Your technique, it's not standard Navy training. Sarah paused and dried her hair. My father taught me to swim when I was very young, ma'am. Did he teach you that specific stroke modification for weighted treading? Manning pressed. Sarah met her gaze evenly. My father believed in being prepared for all contingencies. That evening in the barracks, something had shifted. The other female recruits still kept their distance, but the tone had changed from active hostility to wary assessment. Sarah's performance in the pool had raised questions. Wilson approached as Sarah prepared her uniform for the next day, meticulously polishing her boots. Where did you learn to do that? In the pool today? Her tone wasn't friendly, but the open antagonism was gone. Sarah continued working on her boots. My father was a Navy man. He taught me to swim before I could walk. That's not normal swimming, Wilson persisted. That's combat technique. Sarah's hand still for just a moment. My father was thorough in his lessons. Wilson studied her. You know, there are rumors starting. Rumors about who you really are, why you're really here. Wilson leaned closer. Rodriguez thinks you're some kind of plant. Someone sent to evaluate the program, or something. Sarah's expression revealed nothing. People will talk. Are they right? Instead of answering, Sarah held up her boot, examining the shine. Do you think this meets inspection standards? Wilson recognized the deflection, but didn't push further. Yeah, it'll pass. She hesitated, then added, some of us are going to be practicing not tying after lights out. Extra prep for tomorrow's seamanship test. You can join if you want. It was a small olive branch, the first since training began. Sarah nodded once. Thank you. I might do that. As Wilson walked away, Sarah's gaze drifted to her locker, where beneath her carefully folded spare uniform lay a small leather case, hidden where the daily inspections wouldn't find it. Inside that case was something that would change everything, something she wasn't yet ready to reveal. In the darkness that night, as most recruits slept, Sarah lay awake, her mind not on the next day's challenges, but on a memory. Her father's voice, steady and certain. There will come a time when you'll have to decide whether to remain hidden or stand revealed. Choose that moment carefully, Sarah. Once made, such choices cannot be undone. The following morning brought a change to the routine. Instead of the usual physical training, the recruits were instructed to prepare their quarters for a formal inspection. Commander Blackwood will be conducting a surprise barracks evaluation, Thompson announced, pacing before the assembled platoon. As the commanding officer of this training facility, he expects nothing less than perfection. The news sent a ripple of tension through the ranks. Commander Blackwood's inspections were legendary for their thoroughness and the harsh consequences of failure. You have 2 hours to prepare, Thompson continued. Every surface, every corner. Every personal item must be immaculate. One failure reflects on the entire platoon. As the recruits dispersed to begin preparations, Thompson called out, Chun, a moment. Sarah approached, standing at attention before him. I'm assigning you responsibility for the head facilities, he said, a smirk playing at the corners of his mouth. Every fixture, every tile. Commander Blackwood is particularly attentive to bathroom cleanliness. It was the most demanding assignment, deliberately chosen to set her up for failure. Yes, sir, she replied without hesitation. For the next 2 hours, the barracks transformed into a frenzy of activity. Recruits polished, scrubbed, and aligned every item according to precise military specifications. The air filled with the chemical scent of cleaning products and the occasional curse as someone discovered a previously overlooked speck of dust. In the bathroom, Sarah worked methodically, attacking each surface with practiced efficiency. Despite the size of the task, she maintained a steady pace, moving through the space with the focus of someone accustomed to performing under pressure. Recruit Jackson passed by the doorway, pausing to watch her work. Thompson really has it out for you, doesn't he? Sarah glanced up briefly. The bathroom needs cleaning regardless of who does it. Yeah, but he gave you the biggest job deliberately. She shrugged, returning to scrubbing a shower drain. I've handled worse. Something in her tone made Jackson linger. You know, for someone who's supposed to be struggling through this program, you never actually seem stressed. Sarah didn't look up. Everyone handles pressure differently. That's just it, Jackson said, lowering his voice. You handle it like someone who's been through this before. More than basic training, like someone with experience. For the first time, Sarah paused in her work, meeting his gaze directly. Is there something you're trying to ask me, Jackson? He studied her for a long moment, then shook his head. Never mind, just thinking out loud. He turned to leave, then added, If you finish early, some of us could use help with the common area. It was another small sign of the shifting dynamic within the platoon. At exactly 0900, Commander Blackwood arrived, accompanied by Petty Officer Manning and several other training officers. Tall and imposing with a weathered face that had seen multiple deployments, Blackwood carried himself with the unmistakable authority of someone accustomed to command. Attention on deck, Thompson called out as the inspection party entered the barracks. The recruits snapped to rigid attention beside their assigned areas. Uniforms perfect, expressions focused. Sarah stood at the bathroom entrance, her uniform slightly damp from her efforts but precisely arranged. Commander Blackwood moved through the space slowly, examining each area with methodical precision. He ran white-gloved fingers along surfaces, checked under mattresses, and inspected the alignment of personal items. Occasionally, he would make a note on his clipboard or exchange a quiet word with Manning. When he reached Sarah's station, Blackwood paused, his gaze sweeping over her before moving to the bathroom beyond. "Recruit Chun, correct?" he asked, consulting his clipboard. "Yes, sir," she replied crisply. "Let's see how you've done with your assignment." Blackwood entered the bathroom, Sarah following at a respectful distance. The space gleamed, every surface polished to a high shine, fixtures spotless, not a single hair or water spot visible anywhere. The commander inspected methodically, checking corners and drains, looking behind toilets and under sinks. "Impressive attention to detail, recruit," he finally said, making a note on his clipboard. "Thank you, sir." As he turned to leave, his eyes caught something, the slight outline of Sarah's undershirt visible through her damp uniform top. But it wasn't the dampness that caused him to pause. It was a faint shadow of something beneath the fabric, visible only from a certain angle in the bathroom's harsh lighting. "Recruit Chun, what is that on your back?" he asked, his voice suddenly quieter. Sarah stiffened almost imperceptibly. "Sir, your undershirt is showing something through your uniform." His tone was neutral, but carried a weight of authority. "Is that a tattoo?" The question hung in the air between them. Manning, who had entered behind them, shifted her position slightly to see better. "Yes, sir," Sarah finally answered. "Naval regulations regarding visible tattoos are quite clear, recruit. While in uniform, they must not be visible. It's not visible in normal circumstances, sir." The water from cleaning made the fabric temporarily more transparent. Blackwood studied her for a long moment. "I see. What is the nature of this tattoo?" Sarah hesitated, something crossing her features that might have been calculation. "It's a family emblem, sir." "Family military history?" "Yes, sir." Blackwood's expression changed subtly. "I'd like to see it, recruit." Manning stepped forward. "Sir, perhaps I should—" "It's all right, Petty Officer Manning," Sarah interrupted. "I don't mind." The atmosphere in the small bathroom had transformed, tension humming in the air. Thompson, who had been observing from the doorway, moved closer, clearly interested in any potential infraction. "Turn around, recruit," Blackwood ordered. Sarah complied, turning her back to the commander. "Lower your collar 2 inches, just enough to reveal the upper portion of the tattoo," he instructed. With careful movements, Sarah adjusted her uniform collar, pulling it down just enough to reveal the top edge of a dark marking on her upper back, between her shoulder blades. Only a small portion was visible, what appeared to be the top of a stylized anchor intertwined with something else. Blackwood leaned closer, his expression changing dramatically. He straightened, his voice carrying a new note. "Everyone out. I need to speak with Recruit Chin privately." Thompson frowned. "Sir," as her direct superior. "That was an order, Petty Officer." Blackwood cut him off sharply. Manning ushered Thompson out, closing the door behind them, leaving Sarah alone with the commander. "Show me the entire tattoo, Chin," Blackwood said once they were alone, his voice now carrying an undercurrent of something that might have been shock. Sarah turned her back to him again and carefully unbuttoned the top 3 buttons of her uniform shirt, pulling it and her undershirt down just far enough to reveal the complete tattoo. An intricate design of an anchor intertwined with trident, surrounded by a circle of unique symbols that resembled no known military insignia, yet carried an unmistakable martial authority. Blackwood stared at it in silence for several long seconds. "Button your shirt, recruit," he finally said, his voice unnaturally controlled. Sarah complied, facing him once more. "Where did you get that tattoo?" he asked quietly. "I earned it, sir," she replied, meeting his gaze steadily. "That's not possible." His words were barely above a whisper. "That emblem belongs to—" He stopped himself. "How old are you, Chin?" 23, sir." "And your father was Lieutenant Commander Chin?" "Yes, sir." The same Chun who served on the USS Wayfinder during Operation Silent Harbor? Something flickered in Sarah's eyes. Yes, sir. Blackwood ran a hand over his face, a gesture that seemed suddenly human, breaking through his command persona. I knew your father. I was a junior officer on that deployment. He studied her with new eyes. But that tattoo, it's not given to family members. It's only for... I know what it's for, sir, Sarah interrupted quietly. A heavy silence filled the small space as understanding dawned on Blackwood's face. You're not just his daughter, he said finally. You're Shadowcast. Sarah neither confirmed nor denied the statement, but her silence was answer enough. Blackwood checked his watch. Finish this inspection. Report to my office at 1,300 hours. Tell no one about this conversation. Yes, sir. And Chun. He moved to the door, then paused. Does Manning know? No, sir. No one here does. Blackwood nodded once, his expression grave. Let's keep it that way for now. When he emerged from the bathroom, his command face was firmly back in place. The bathroom passes inspection, he announced to Thompson. In fact, it's exemplary. He continued through the barracks, completing the inspection with the same attention to detail, giving no indication that anything unusual had occurred. Manning, however, watched Sarah with renewed interest, noting the subtle change in how Blackwood addressed her. No longer the impersonal tone used with all recruits, but something carrying a note of respect. When the inspection concluded 30 minutes later, Blackwood addressed the assembled platoon. Your performance today has been satisfactory. There are areas for improvement, which your training officers will review with you. His eyes swept across the recruits, pausing briefly on Sarah. Remember that attention to detail can be the difference between success and failure in the field. That will be all. As the commander and his staff departed, Thompson turned to the recruits. You heard the commander. There's room for improvement. We'll be conducting remedial cleaning after evening chow. His gaze found Sarah. Chun, the commander wants to see you at 1300. Don't keep him waiting. Whispers immediately rippled through the platoon. A summons to the commander's office was unprecedented for a recruit still in basic training. Rodriguez nudged Jackson. What did she do? Jackson shrugged, but his eyes followed Sarah with newfound curiosity. Maybe it's about whatever happened in the bathroom. What had happened in there? Wilson asked, stepping closer. The commander came out looking like he'd seen a ghost. Sarah moved away from the conversation, methodically returning her cleaning supplies to their proper storage. Her face revealed nothing, but there was a new tension in her movements. The careful precision of someone who knows they've reached a critical juncture. In the hours before her meeting with Blackwood, Sarah went through the day's training exercises with the same quiet competence she'd always shown. But now, the other recruits watched her differently, speculation growing with each passing hour. I bet she's getting kicked out, Recruit Thompson suggested during marksmanship practice. Maybe they found something in her background. Check Wilson, who had been paired with Sarah for the exercise, shook her head. You don't get a private meeting with the commander for a dismissal. That's handled by training officers. Then what? Wilson watched as Sarah executed a perfect series of shots, her bullets forming a tight cluster in the center of the target. I don't know, but I'm starting to think there's a lot more to Chun than anyone realized. At 12:45, Sarah was excused from training to clean up before her meeting. As she changed into a fresh uniform in the empty barracks, she paused, her hand moving to touch the tattoo hidden beneath her shirt. For a brief moment, emotion crossed her face, something like resignation mixed with determination. The moment had come sooner than she'd planned, but perhaps it was for the best. Her father had always taught her that timing was everything in combat, in life, and especially in revealing one's true identity. Commander Blackwood's office occupied the corner of the administration building, its windows overlooking both the parade ground and the distant shoreline. Unlike the utilitarian spaces that dominated the training facility, his office carried the weight of naval tradition, oak furniture, carefully mounted photographs of ships he'd served on, and behind his desk, a shadow box containing his numerous decorations. At precisely 1,300 hours, Sarah knocked on the door. Enter, came the response from within. She stepped inside to find not just Commander Blackwood, but also Petty Officer Manning, and a third officer she didn't recognize, an older woman with captain's insignia and the unmistakable bearing of someone accustomed to classified briefings. "Recruitchen reporting as ordered, sir," Sarah announced, standing at rigid attention. "At ease, recruit," Blackwood said, gesturing to a chair position before his desk. "Please sit down." The request itself was unusual. Recruits were rarely offered seats in Superior's office. Sarah complied, her posture remaining perfect even in the chair. "This is Captain Eleanor Vance," Blackwood indicated the unknown officer. "She's here from Naval Intelligence." Sarah's expression betrayed nothing, though the presence of Naval Intelligence confirmed that her cover was irretrievably compromised. Captain Vance studied Sarah with penetrating eyes. "Recruit Chun, or should I call you by your actual rank?" The question hung in the air. Manning shifted uncomfortably, clearly not privy to whatever revelation was unfolding. "For the purposes of this conversation," Sarah replied carefully, "my current designation is appropriate, ma'am." Vance's lips twitched in what might have been amusement. "Very diplomatic. Commander Blackwood contacted me immediately after discovering your affiliation. Fortunately, I happened to be in the area." Blackwood leaned forward. "I've explained to Captain Vance what I saw. The Shadowcast insignia is unmistakable, even after all these years." Manning looked between them, confusion evident. "Sir, I don't understand. What is Shadowcast?" Vance and Blackwood exchanged glances before the captain answered. "Petty Officer Manning, what I'm about to tell you is classified at the highest level. The only reason you're hearing at all is because of your direct supervisory role with Recruit Chun." Manning straightened, the seriousness of the situation becoming clear. "Shadowcast is or was a highly specialized naval intelligence program," Vance explained. "It was established in the early 2000s for deep cover operations in maritime environments where conventional forces couldn't operate. The program was officially disbanded in 2015. Except it wasn't actually disbanded," Blackwood added. "It went deeper underground." Vance nodded. "The tattoo Commander Blackwood observed is only given to fully activated Shadowcast operatives, not family members, not support personnel, only actual field operatives." Manning's eyes widened as she turned to look at Sarah. "But that's impossible. She's only 23. If the program ended in 2015, she would have been 15, Vance finished. "Yes, we're aware of the discrepancy." All eyes turned to Sarah, who remained composed under their scrutiny. "Would you care to explain, Recruit Chen?" Blackwood prompted. Sarah took a measured breath. "The program was restructured, not disbanded. Part of that restructuring included a legacy initiative for children of original operatives. I was recruited at 17, activated at 19. Activated," Manning repeated, the military euphemism not lost on her. "Shadowcast operatives are trained to integrate into various scenarios, including military training programs," Vance explained. "Sometimes to evaluate security, sometimes for rapid deployment preparation, sometimes for other purposes." Her gaze fixed on Sarah, which begs the question, why are you here, operative? Sarah's eyes met Vance's directly. "Training evaluation and capability assessment, ma'am." "Under whose authority?" Blackwood asked sharply. "Admiral Hargrove, Pacific Command Special Operations Liaison." The name caused both Vance and Blackwood to tense visibly. "I was unaware Hargrove had authorization to deploy Shadowcast assets," Vance said carefully. "The authorization came through channels following the Strait of Malacca incident last year," Sarah replied. "The Admiral believed our training programs needed reassessment." Vance nodded slowly. "I see." She turned to Blackwood. "Commander, I believe we need to contact the Admiral directly. This situation requires clarification." "Agreed." Blackwood pressed the intercom on his desk. "Yeoman, prepare a secure line to Pacific Command. Admiral Hargrove's office." "Yes, sir," came the immediate response. While they waited, Manning continued to stare at Sarah, processing what she'd learned. So everything, your struggles, your performance issues, it was all an act? Not everything, Sarah replied. The assessment required authentic conditions. Petty Officer Thompson's attention was not part of the plan, but provided valuable data. Manning shook her head in disbelief. Data. You've been collecting data on us this whole time. On the effectiveness of the training program, Sarah clarified. Not on individuals specifically. The phone on Blackwood's desk buzzed. Secure line to Admiral Hargrove is ready, sir. Thank you. He picked up the receiver, putting it on speaker. Admiral Hargrove, this is Commander Blackwood at Naval Training Facility, Clearwater. Blackwood, came a gruff voice over the line. This is unexpected. What can I do for you? Sir, I'm here with Captain Vance from Naval Intelligence. And he hesitated. A Shadowcast operative who identified herself as acting under your authority. Designator Chun. There was a long pause on the line. I see. Hargrove finally responded. And Captain Vance is present? Yes, Admiral. Vance confirmed. We're seeking verification of Operative Chen's assignment parameters. Another pause. The operative's presence at your facility is authorized. Her assessment mission is legitimate. However, the Admiral's tone shifted subtly. The circumstances of her identification were not part of the operational plan. It was unavoidable, sir, Sarah spoke up. Commander Blackwood recognized the Shadowcast emblem during a routine inspection. Understood, operative. Hargrove's voice carried a note of resignation. Commander Blackwood, Captain Vance. Now that the operative has been identified, protocol requires immediate extraction and reassignment. Blackwood frowned. Sir, we're mid-cycle with the training platoon. Removing a recruit suddenly will raise questions. I'm aware, Hargrove replied, which is why we have contingencies. Captain Vance will coordinate the extraction to appear as a standard transfer. In the meantime, the operative will continue as a regular recruit until arrangements are finalized. And her report, sir? Vance asked, will be completed and submitted through regular channels. I expect a full assessment of the training program's effectiveness, particularly regarding Petty Officer Thompson's methods. Sarah's expression remained neutral, but something flickered in her eyes at the mention of Thompson. Admiral, Blackwood said hesitantly, given the circumstances, should Petty Officer Thompson be informed of Operative Chen's status? Negative, came the immediate response. Operational security remains in effect. No one outside this room is to know the operative's true identity. That includes Petty Officer Thompson. Understood, sir. I'll have my staff coordinate with Captain Vance on next steps. In the meantime, maintain normal operations. Hargrove out. The line went dead, leaving the room in silence. Captain Vance was the first to speak. Well, that confirms it. Operative Chun, you'll continue your cover until extraction arrangements are complete. I'll coordinate with Admiral Hargrove's staff and inform you through Commander Blackwood. Yes, ma'am, Sarah replied. Blackwood studied her with new eyes. All this time, you were evaluating us. I was assessing the effectiveness of the training program. Sarah corrected. And I've been impressed with many aspects of it, sir. Just not Petty Officer Thompson. Manning said, a statement rather than a question. Sarah chose her words carefully. Petty Officer Thompson's methods reflect certain systemic issues in how we prepare naval personnel for modern warfare environments. In other words, Vance translated, his approach is outdated and potentially counterproductive. The final assessment will be more nuanced, ma'am. Blackwood leaned back in his chair. Does Thompson suspect anything? No, sir, Sarah replied confidently. He believes exactly what he's meant to believe, that I'm struggling to meet standards and will likely wash out. And the other recruits? They've noticed inconsistencies in my performance, but attribute them to luck or hidden athletic background. Nothing that would compromise operational security. Manning shook her head slightly. I noticed something was off. The way you handle certain situations. It wasn't consistent with your background file. That's why you're a good training officer, Sarah said, meeting Manning's gaze. You pay attention to details others miss. The compliment seemed to catch Manning off guard. So what happens now? Manning asked. You just continue pretending to be a struggling recruit? For operational integrity, yes. Captain Vance answered before Sarah could. The assessment must be completed under the original parameters to maintain data validity. Which means, Blackwood added, we continue as if this meeting never happened. He turned to Sarah. Operative Chun, your dismissal return to your regular training schedule. We'll contact you when extraction arrangements are finalized. Yes, sir. And Chun, Blackwood added as she turned to leave, your father will be proud. Something genuine crossed Sarah's face. The first truly unguarded emotion any of them had seen from her. Thank you, sir. After she departed, Manning turned to the others. So we just pretend we don't know? While Thompson continues his campaign against her. Those are our orders, Blackwood replied, though he didn't look entirely comfortable with them. It's more than that, Vance added. The assessment must be completed without interference. If we change our behavior toward her or Thompson, we compromise the entire operation. Manning frowned. It doesn't sit right, knowing what I know now. Welcome to the world of intelligence operations, Petty Officer, Vance said with a grim smile. Nothing ever sits quite right. When Sarah returned to the training area, the platoon was engaged in classroom instruction on naval protocols. She slipped into the back of the room, drawing curious glances from the other recruits. Thompson paused his lecture, fixing her with a hard stare. Nice of you to join us, Recruit Chun. I trust your meeting with Commander Blackwood was illuminating. Yes, sir, she replied, taking her seat. Care to share with the class what was so important that you needed to miss valuable training time? Sarah met his gaze evenly. The commander asked me not to discuss the meeting, sir. Murmurs rippled through the classroom. Thompson's eyes narrowed at the implied rebuke. Well, we wouldn't want to contradict the commander, would we? His tone dripped with sarcasm. Since you've missed half the lesson, you can stay after hours to catch up. I'll personally ensure you understand the material. Yes, sir, Sarah replied, her expression giving away nothing of her thoughts. As the lesson continued, the other recruits kept stealing glances at her, speculation running rampant. The mysterious meeting with the commander had only intensified their curiosity about the enigmatic recruit who sometimes struggled, yet sometimes displayed surprising capability. After class, as the platoon filed out for their next training evolution, Rodriguez approached her. So what really happened with Blackwood? He asked, keeping his voice low. You in trouble? Nothing that concerns a platoon, she replied neutrally. Come on, Chen. Nobody gets called to see the commander unless it's something major. You getting kicked out? Something shifted in Sarah's demeanor, subtle but noticeable. A slight straightening of her posture, a cooler edge to her gaze. I said it doesn't concern the platoon, Rodriguez. The change was enough to make him step back instinctively. Whoa. Okay, just asking. He studied her with renewed interest. You know you're different today. We're all different every day, she replied, moving past him to join the others. As the afternoon progressed through weapons training and tactical simulations, Sarah maintained her cover perfectly, struggling just enough to remain consistent with her established pattern, yet not so much as to draw undue attention. But the dynamics had shifted. Manning watched her with new understanding. Blackwood, who briefly observed their field exercises, nodded to her with subtle acknowledgement. And most telling, when Thompson berated her for a minor infraction during rifle assembly, she caught the flash of disgust that passed over Manning's face. The web of knowledge and secrecy was changing everything, even as they all pretended nothing had changed. That evening, as promised, Thompson kept Sarah after hours for remedial instruction in the empty classroom. I don't know what game you're playing, Chin, he said, his voice low and threatening, but I don't like it. Secret meetings with the commander, Manning watching you like you're some kind of special project. Something's going on, and I'm going to find out what it is. Sarah remained silent, her gaze fixed ahead. Nothing to say? He stepped closer, deliberately invading her personal space. You think having friends in high places will save you from washing out? Because I've seen your kind before, connected, privileged, thinking the rules don't apply to you. She still said nothing, which seemed to infuriate him further. Answer me when I'm speaking to you, recruit. There's nothing to say, sir, she finally replied, her voice steady. I'm here to complete my training like everyone else. Thompson's face flushed with anger. You think you're special? You're nothing. Tomorrow's underwater evacuation drill will prove it. I hope you can hold your breath. Chun, because you're going to need to. The threat hung in the air between them. For the first time, Sarah allowed herself to look directly into his eyes, not with fear or subservience, but with a calm assessment that momentarily seemed to unnerve him. Is that all, sir? She asked quietly. Thompson stepped back, unsettled by her composure. Dismissed. 0500 tomorrow. Underwater evacuation chamber. Don't be late. Yes, sir. As she left the classroom, Sarah knew that tomorrow would bring matters to a head, one way or another. The underwater evacuation drill was notorious. A simulated submarine emergency evacuation conducted in a pressurized chamber filled with water, requiring recruits to perform complex tasks while managing limited oxygen. It was also notoriously easy to manipulate by an unscrupulous instructor. In the barracks that night, as the other recruits slept, Sarah sat awake on her bunk, writing in what appeared to be a personal journal. In reality, she was completing her assessment report, documenting Thompson's methods and their impact on training effectiveness. On a nearby bunk, Wilson stirred, sitting up to find Sarah still awake. Can't sleep? Sarah closed her journal, just finishing some thoughts. Wilson studied her in the dim light. Everyone's talking about your meeting with Blackwood. People love a mystery. Is it true he recognized you from somewhere? Sarah's expression revealed nothing. Why would a commander recognize a recruit he's never met? That's what we're all wondering, Wilson replied. Look, Chun, I don't know what's going on, but tomorrow's underwater drill is no joke. Thompson has been talking about it all week, and he's got something planned for you specifically. I appreciate the warning. Wilson hesitated, then added, Be careful in there. Thompson had a recruit hospitalized last cycle during the same drill. Guy panicked, inhaled water, nearly drowned. Sarah nodded once, understanding the significance of the information. Thank you. As Wilson returned to her bunk, Sarah made a final note in her journal, a decision that would alter the course of events dramatically. Tomorrow wouldn't just be another evaluation point. It would be the culmination of her assessment, one way or another. Dawn broke over Naval Training Facility Clearwater with a blood-red sunrise that painted the ocean horizon in crimson and gold. By 0500, Sarah and her platoon stood at attention outside the underwater training facility, a square concrete building housing the specialized chambers used to simulate flooded compartments and emergency evacuations. Thompson paced before them, his face set in hard lines. Today separates the sailors from the civilians, he announced. The underwater evacuation drill simulates a worst-case scenario aboard a naval vessel, flooding, system failures, and need to evacuate through flooded compartments. Several recruits shifted nervously. Water training was challenging under normal circumstances. Under pressure, with limited visibility and oxygen, it became genuinely dangerous. You'll enter the chamber in pairs, Thompson continued. Once inside, water will fill the compartment. You must locate the emergency breathing apparatus, secure it properly, then find and open the escape hatch, all while maintaining your composure and supporting your partner. His eyes locked onto Sarah. Chun, since you performed so admirably in our pool exercises, you'll demonstrate for the platoon. You and, he scanned the nervous faces, Rodriguez, you'll be first. Rodriguez visibly paled. He was the platoon's weakest swimmer, a fact Thompson knew well. Manning, standing to the side with the safety team, stepped forward. Sir, standard protocol calls for pairing stronger swimmers with weaker ones for safety. Perhaps Chin should be paired with Wilson instead. I'm aware of protocols. Petty Officer Manning, Thompson replied coldly. This is my training evolution. Chun and Rodriguez gear up. As they moved toward the equipment area, Manning approached Sarah. Remember your training, she said quietly, the double meaning clear. And watch out for Rodriguez. He's not confident in the water. Understood, ma'am. Chun! Manning added even more quietly. The safety team has been fully briefed. If anything seems off. Sarah gave a barely perceptible nod. I've got this, ma'am. The preparation area contained wetsuits, fins, masks, and emergency breathing devices, essentially modified scuba equipment designed for rapid deployment in emergencies. As Sarah and Rodriguez suited up, the tension between them was palpable. Listen, Rodriguez said, his voice low and strained. I'm not great with this water stuff. If I start to panic in there. You won't, Sarah interrupted, checking his equipment with practiced efficiency. Just focus on your breathing and follow my lead. He looked at her strangely. Since when are you the expert? You nearly drowned in the pool last week. Did I? She asked simply, tightening his harness straps with precise movements that betrayed years of experience. Before Rodriguez could respond, Thompson approached. Time to get wet, recruits. The chamber is ready. The underwater training chamber was a reinforced concrete room approximately 15 feet square, with a depth of 10 feet. Metal fixtures simulated submarine hatches, control panels, and other obstacles. Observation windows along one wall allowed instructors and safety personnel to monitor exercises. As they entered, Thompson gave his final instructions. The chamber will flood completely. Your task is to find an emergency breathing apparatus mounted inside, then locate and open the escape hatch in the ceiling. You have 8 minutes from when the water reaches halfway. Any longer, and in a real situation, you'd be dead. The heavy door sealed behind them with an ominous clang. Inside, the bare chamber contained various submarine fixtures, but notably fewer emergency breathing devices than there should have been. Sarah counted quickly. Only one apparatus for the two of them, a calculated disadvantage engineered by Thompson. Looks like we'll have to share, she told Rodriguez, keeping her voice steady and confident. Remember your buddy breathing training? His eyes widened. That's not regulation. There should be... Focus, Rodriguez. The water's coming in. Indeed, water had begun pouring into the chamber from inlets near the floor, quickly rising around their ankles, then their knees. Through the observation window, they could see Thompson watching, with Manning and the safety team beside him. When the water reaches our shoulders, take a deep breath, Sarah instructed. We'll need to dive for the breathing apparatus first. Rodriguez nodded, his face tense with fear. The cold water continued rising steadily, waist high, chest high, then finally reaching their shoulders. As it did, the flow increased dramatically, signaling Thompson had opened the valves to their maximum. Deep breath now, Sarah called out, demonstrating the proper technique. They both inhaled deeply just as the water covered their heads. The chamber was now completely flooded, the exercise officially underway. The timer had started, 8 minutes to complete their task or fail. Sarah oriented herself quickly, spotting the single emergency breathing apparatus mounted on the far wall. She grabbed Rodriguez's arm and pulled him toward it, her movements efficient and purposeful in the water. Reaching the apparatus, she quickly detached it and demonstrated its use to Rodriguez. Purge the regulator. Take a breath, pass it to him, then wait while he breathed, then repeat. Buddy breathing was an advanced skill, one they'd only practiced briefly in controlled pool conditions. Through the observation window, Manning watched intently, concern evident on her face. Beside her, Thompson maintained a neutral expression, but there was something in his eyes, anticipation, perhaps, or satisfaction at the scenario he'd engineered. Inside the flooded chamber, Sarah and Rodriguez established a rhythm, sharing the breathing apparatus as they began searching for the escape hatch. Normal procedure would place it in a standard location, but Thompson had modified the chamber. The usual ceiling hatch had been sealed shut, with a temporary replacement installed in a different location. Sarah spotted it first, a smaller-than-regulation hatch partially hidden behind a simulated control panel. She guided Rodriguez toward it, pointing emphatically. Through his mask, his eyes showed understanding. The hatch had a manual wheel lock that required significant strength to turn, especially underwater with limited leverage. Rodriguez tried first, straining against the wheel, but it barely moved. After 30 seconds of effort, he shook his head, passing the breathing apparatus to Sarah. She took a breath, then handed it back to him immediately. Instead of taking her turn with the wheel, she studied the mechanism closely, noting how it had been deliberately tightened beyond normal specifications. Another of Thompson's modifications. Through the window, more than half their time had elapsed, 4 minutes gone, less than 4 remaining. Manning had moved closer to the emergency protocol station, her hand hovering near the override button that would immediately drain the chamber if needed. Inside, Sarah made a decision. She gestured for Rodriguez to continue using the breathing apparatus, while she positioned herself at the wheel, bracing her feet against an adjacent wall for leverage. With a powerful twist that displayed none of the weakness she'd been pretending to have for weeks, she rotated the wheel a full quarter turn. Rodriguez's eyes widened in surprise. This was not the struggling recruit he'd come to expect. Sarah continued working the wheel with controlled strength, each turn bringing them closer to escape. In the observation area, Thompson's expression had changed from satisfaction to confusion as he watched Chun perform with unexpected confidence. With just over 2 minutes remaining, the wheel finally completed its rotation. The hatch released with a metallic groan, creating a small opening to the dry chamber above. Sarah gestured for Rodriguez to go first, guiding him toward the exit. As Rodriguez pulled himself through the hatch, Sarah prepared to follow. Then, through the observation window, she saw Thompson reach for a control panel, one separate from the main exercise controls. In that moment, she understood. He was making one final attempt to force her failure. Suddenly, the emergency breathing apparatus in her hand stopped functioning. The air supply cut remotely. At the same time, the open hatch began to automatically reseal itself, a safety feature being deliberately misused. Manning shouted something at Thompson, reaching for the emergency override, but he blocked her access, pointing at the protocol manual, likely claiming some training justification for the additional challenge. Sarah had seconds to make a critical choice: try to force a closing hatch, potentially injuring herself, or remain in the chamber with no air supply. She chose a third option. With a powerful kick, she propelled herself toward the observation window, instead of the hatch, pressing herself against the glass. She came face to face with Thompson, their eyes meeting to the barriers of water and glass. Then, with deliberate slowness, she removed her mask, revealing an expression not of panic, but of absolute calm. She held the non-functioning breathing apparatus up the window, pointing directly at the sabotaged air valve, then at Thompson. The message was unmistakable. "I know what you did." Manning finally pushed past Thompson, slamming her hand on the emergency override. Alarms blared as drainage valves opened, rapidly emptying the chamber. But Sarah didn't wait for the water to recede. Taking a final deep breath, showing a lung capacity far beyond what a struggling recruit should possess, she swam powerfully to the hatch, forcing herself through the narrowing opening just before it sealed completely. She emerged in the upper chamber where Rodriguez sat gasping for breath. Together, they exited to the final door, emerging onto the facility deck where the rest of the platoon waited with expressions of shock and confusion. Sarah stood straight, water streaming from her wet suit, her breathing controlled despite what should have been a near-death experience. Rodriguez stared at her as if seeing her for the first time. "What the hell was that? How did you—" Before he could finish, the door from the control room burst open. Manning entered first, her face a mask of barely contained fury. Behind her came Thompson, his expression a mixture of anger and suspicion. "Recruit Chun," Thompson began, his voice low and dangerous. "You deliberately violated protocols by removing your mask underwater. That kind of showboating endangers." "That's enough, Petty Officer Thompson." The new voice cut through the tension like a knife. All heads turned to see Commander Blackwood entering, accompanied by Captain Vance, and most surprisingly, a tall, silver-haired man wearing the insignia of a Navy Admiral, 3 stars glinting on his shoulder boards. The entire facility fell silent. Even Thompson seemed momentarily stunned into speechlessness. "Admiral Hargrove," Blackwood announced, unnecessarily giving the man's unmistakable rank insignia. "Sir, this is Petty Officer Thompson, lead instructor for this training platoon." Admiral Hargrove surveyed the scene with coldly assessing eyes. Petty Officer Thompson, I've heard a great deal about your training methods. Thompson snapped to attention. Sir, yes, sir. I maintain the highest standards for... Did those standards include cutting the air supply to a recruit's emergency breathing apparatus? Hargrove interrupted, his voice deceptively calm. Thompson paled visibly. Sir, I was simply introducing an additional stress element to... To what? Hargrove pressed. To deliberately endanger a trainee to satisfy some personal vendetta? Manning stepped forward. Sir, I witnessed Petty Officer Thompson deliberately disable the emergency breathing apparatus and attempt to seal the escape hatch while the chamber was still occupied. When I tried to initiate emergency protocols, he physically blocked my access to the controls. The Admiral's expression hardened. Is this true, Petty Officer? Thompson's composure finally cracked. She needed to be tested, sir. She's not cut out for this program. I was proving what everyone else was afraid to acknowledge. I see, Hargrove replied coldly. And you decided this justified potentially drowning a recruit? She wasn't going to drown, sir. The safety team. The safety team you prevented from doing their job? Manning interjected. Hargrove turned to Sarah, who still stood at attention, water dripping from her wetsuit. Recruitchen, are you injured? No, sir, she replied crisply. The Admiral studied her for a long moment, something passing between them that no one else could interpret. Then he turned back to Thompson. Petty Officer Marcus Thompson, you are relieved of duty, effective immediately. Report to the security office for processing. You will remain confined to quarters pending formal investigation into your actions today. Thompson's face drained of all color. Sir, you can't. That was not a suggestion, Petty Officer. Hargrove cut him off sharply. Master at Arms. Two naval security personnel who had accompanied the Admiral stepped forward. Escort Petty Officer Thompson to the security office. Hargrove ordered. Ensure he has no further contact with any personnel from this training platoon. As Thompson was led away, his expression a mixture of shock and rage, the rest of the platoon remained frozen in place, stunned by the dramatic turn of events. Hargrove addressed the assembled recruits. The remainder of today's training is canceled. Return to your barracks and await further instructions from Petty Officer Manning, who will temporarily assume instructor duties for this platoon. As the recruits began to disperse, murmuring among themselves, Hargrove turned to Sarah. Recruit Chun, a word in private, please. Yes, sir. Together with Blackwood and Vance, they moved to a separate office within the facility, closing the door behind them. Well, Hargrove said once they were alone, this isn't exactly how we planned for your assessment to conclude. No, sir, Sarah agreed, her demeanor shifting suddenly. Standing straighter, her eyes more focused, her entire bearing suddenly reflecting someone far more experienced than a basic training recruit. Thompson accelerated the timeline by creating a legitimately dangerous situation, Blackwood said, shaking his head. He could have killed you. Unlikely, sir. I was prepared for various contingencies, including equipment sabotage. Vance smiled thinly. That's why we select Shadowcast operatives so carefully. Always 3 steps ahead. Hargrove crossed to a secure cabinet, retrieving a towel which he handed to Sarah. Your cover is effectively blown, Lieutenant Chun. The display in that training chamber. No regular recruit could have maintained that level of composure or demonstrated those skills. Lieutenant, Blackwood repeated, surprised. I knew she was Shadowcast, but not her actual rank. Need to know, Commander, Hargrove replied simply. Lieutenant Sarachin is one of our most effective deep cover operatives, specializing in training program assessment and organizational vulnerability testing. Sarah toweled her hair dry, the differential body language of a recruit completely gone now. My final assessment was nearly complete anyway, Admiral. Today's incident simply provided the capstone evidence. And your conclusions? Vance asked. The program has significant strengths in technical training and team building, Sarah replied professionally. However, it also has critical vulnerabilities in instructor oversight, abuse prevention, and psychological safety protocols. Thompson is an anomaly. He's a symptom of systemic issues in how we select and monitor training personnel. Hargrove nodded grimly, which is exactly why this assessment was necessary. Too many reports of training accidents have crossed my desk in the past 18 months. Blackwood looked troubled. I had no idea Thompson would go that far. Regular performance reviews showed nothing concerning. Because he was careful, Sarah explained, he selected targets who wouldn't or couldn't report behavior, recruits who were already struggling, who feared retaliation, or who believed extreme methods were normal. Classic predatory behavior disguised as maintaining high standards. What happens now? Blackwood asked. Hargrove checked his watch. Lieutenant Chun will be extracted from the program today. The official story will be a family emergency, requiring her immediate transfer. By the time the platoon graduates, they'll have forgotten the specifics, remembering only that a recruit named Chun withdrew early in training. And Thompson, Vance pressed, will face a formal investigation and likely court-martial for endangering personnel and violating numerous safety protocols. The evidence from today alone is damning, but I suspect Lieutenant Chen's full report will reveal a pattern of behavior that merits severe consequences. Sarah nodded, her expression serious. My comprehensive assessment details 17 separate incidents of dangerous or abusive behavior by Petty Officer Thompson over just 14 days. Extrapolated across his 5-year tenure as a training instructor, the implications are disturbing. Indeed, Hargrove agreed. Commander, I'll need your full cooperation with the investigation. Captain Vance will remain on site to oversee the process and ensure Lieutenant Chen's extraction proceeds smoothly. Of course, Admiral. Whatever you need. Hargrove turned to Sarah. Lieutenant, you have 30 minutes to collect your personal effects from the barracks. Captain Vance will accompany you to maintain operational security. Your transfer paperwork is already being processed. Yes, sir. Sarah straightened to attention. Every inch the naval officer she truly was. 30 minutes later, as she emerged from the barracks with a small duffel bag, Sarah found several members of her platoon waiting outside, Wilson, Jackson, and even Rodriguez among them. So, you're really leaving? Wilson asked, stepping forward. Family emergency? I've been transferred to a facility closer to home, Sarah replied, maintaining her cover-out professional habit. Rodriguez shook his head. That's not it, is it? Not after what happened today. No regular recruit does what you did in that chamber. Sarah offered a small smile. Maybe I'm just a fast learner. Or maybe you were never really a struggling recruit at all, Jackson suggested. The Admiral showing up right after that exercise, Thompson being relieved on the spot. Something bigger's going on here. Captain Vance, standing nearby, checked her watch pointedly. Recruit Chun, your transport is waiting. Sarah shouldered her bag. I have to go. Will we see you again? Wilson asked. Unlikely, Sarah replied honestly. But remember what you saw today. Remember that appearances can be deceiving, and that true capability isn't always visible when we see you again? Wilson asked. Unlikely, Sarah replied honestly. But remember what you saw today. Remember that appearances can be deceiving, and that true capability isn't always visible on the surface. Were you really? Rodriguez asked quietly. Sarah glanced at Vance, who gave an imperceptible shake of her head. Just another sailor doing her job, Sarah answered. Take care of yourselves and watch out for each other. That's what really matters in this Navy. With that, she turned and walked away, following Captain Vance to the waiting vehicle. As they drove off the base, Sarah looked back once at the training facility that had been her home and mission for the past 2 weeks. Penny for your thoughts, Lieutenant, Vance said as they passed through the main gate. Sarah turned forward again, her expression professionally neutral once more. Just considering the next mission, Captain, there are other training facilities, other Thompsons. Always the Operative. Vance commented with approval. Admiral Hargrove mentioned the West Coast program might benefit from your assessment techniques next. Sarah nodded, already mentally preparing for a new cover, a new identity, a new mission. I'll be ready. In her wake, she left a transformed training platoon. Recruits who would never again take anyone at face value, who would remember the small, seemingly struggling woman who had revealed unexpected depths when it mattered most. And somewhere in the Naval Personnel System, the file of Petty Officer Marcus Thompson was being flagged with terms like pending investigation and removed from duty. His career effectively finished. Justice. Sarah reflected as the base disappeared from view. Sometimes wore unexpected uniforms. Today, it had worn the face of a recruit everyone had underestimated. Exactly as planned. 6 months later, Lieutenant Sarah Chun received new orders. Another training facility. Another cover identity. Another abusive instructor who thought he knew exactly what kind of person didn't belong in his Navy. He was about to learn how wrong assumptions could be.